Manholes caused misery, Verstappen was victorious, and Mercedes mashed this weekend in Vegas. So I asked you for your hottest takes from the 2023 Las Vegas Grand Prix, and they'll keep me up later than free practice too. Nathan says this race silenced all the people prematurely condemning the Las Vegas Grand Prix because it's a street circuit in the USA. It goes to show that you can't judge a track before a race is held on it. I do feel like we can't forget the madness that happened during the first free practice sessions. Thursday and Friday were a little bit chaotic in Vegas. The manhole cover coming loose and destroying Carlos Sainz's car shouldn't really happen at the pinnacle of motorsport, and fans being unable to stay and watch that second practice session was a real shame, but I also kind of understand why it happened, and the cars being on track until 4 a.m. It isn't a good look, but I do think that the qualifying was very fun. The grid was nicely mixed going into that final qualifying session. But then in the race, there were lots of battles, lots of talking points, and lots of little twists that made it so that we couldn't 100% tell who was going to be in the top 10 by the finish. And it was a very fun race overall. Thursday was bad, but the rest of the weekend was absolutely sensational. And I'm really looking forward to going back to Las Vegas again next year and hoping that they can deal with the issues of putting the track together, because actually, it was really fun. Simply says Max was lucky Ferrari didn't pit Leclerc, otherwise he would have lost. It was nice to see Max Verstappen in a real battle this weekend. It feels like a long time ago since Max Verstappen's been at the lead of a Grand Prix, but there's actually been someone close enough to really take it to him and possibly get the victory over him. I mean, Charles Leclerc on another day would have been able to be even closer to Max Verstappen and possibly taken the lead off of him. Although Max Verstappen didn't make it easy for himself either. A penalty after the first corner for ushering Charles Leclerc wide, and a penalty that was justified. Then damage from a tangle with George Russell. Okay, he's not at fault there, but again, it's another thing he has to deal with. And then you just keep throwing things at Max Verstappen, and in the end, he still comes out on top. It is just ridiculous. I mean, considering he's also hated being in Vegas. All week, Max Verstappen has gone on and on about how he just wants to get on with the racing and not have to deal with all of the other stuff that's going on in and around these American races. And he's stuck to his guns, to be fair to him, and he takes home win number 18. I'm going to throw in one of my own opinions here. Charles Leclerc finally got a result that he has deserved for a while now. I know he did eventually fall behind Max Verstappen despite starting on pole position, but that's just the norm for Charles Leclerc at this point. What is it, 23 poles now for 5 victories in Formula 1? But considering the pace that Max Verstappen has been able to find on those hard compound tyres, and generally the pace that Max Verstappen has, this second place is a great result, but it's been a long time coming is my point. Charles Leclerc has been so unlucky in recent weekends, whether it's been strategy calls going wrong or the car falling apart on formation laps. We have seen Charles Leclerc put in some really solid performances and not really get the points back that he's deserved, and we finally can give Charles Leclerc credit for his tenacity, the fact that he picks himself up every single weekend and delivers again and again, and he's finally been rewarded. Code Gaming says Perez cannot finish a last lap ahead of a rival. First Alonso in Interlagos, and now Leclerc in Vegas. I'm going to try and put a little bit of a positive spin on this for Sergio Perez, which you might not have been expecting, but I suppose at least Sergio Perez is in the battle for podium places, which he has been criticised of throughout this season. Even if then he is dropping out of the podium places in Brazil or taking a step down on the podium in Vegas, I think even though he's come out second best on both occasions, he has put in some much better performances post that Mexico move that didn't go so well for him. A second place in the drivers' standings is now finally confirmed, which is the first time that Red Bull have ever achieved that in their entire history. And you think back to how dominant Sebastian Vettel was, it's just another accolade that Sergio Perez can say he has as part of this team and within one of the most dominant teams in Formula 1 history. It's been a tough year overall, but looking back on it, there are some nice moments for Perez in there. Earth Arrow says, Russell doesn't seem great at using his mirrors. Yeah, I do agree with this. I think George Russell still seems to lack when it comes to proper wheel-to-wheel racing with the front runners. Like, could you see Verstappen or Sainz or Lando doing the same thing? I don't think so. I think it is something that you can hold over George Russell, the fact that he doesn't seem 100% comfortable with those really tight battles at the front. But to be fair, Both of the Mercedes drivers were involved in clashes. I suppose at least it wasn't with each other, which it normally is. Lewis Hamilton was also caught up in the turn 1 mess and collided with Oscar Piastri later on in the race as well, whereas I guess George Russell did only clash once with Max Verstappen, but it did cause a little bit more damage and got that 5-second penalty, which cost him dearly. Which leads on to Unnamed saying Mercedes deserved to lose P2 in the Constructors. Ferrari have actually improved as a team for this year. They just didn't have quite the car compared to last year. And I actually agree with this too. I don't think Mercedes are anywhere near the second best car at the moment, and I think they benefited a lot from McLaren and Ferrari fumbling, particularly towards the start of the season, which I guess is a positive in itself, that Mercedes do finish races quite often and they're quite good at limiting damages generally. But in the second half of this season, that's becoming less and less true, especially this weekend, where it was just, as I said, between the two of them, really clumsy, and with a 2-point gap in the standings going into Abu Dhabi, I think Ferrari might do it, which is mad because it's Mercedes and Ferrari, and you should never really bet on Ferrari being able to do something, but Mercedes do uncharacteristically keep falling at the final hurdle. Leg says Ocon and Stroll proved the haters wrong. Let's start by talking about Esteban Ocon, because he was out in Q1 because of a tangle with Max Verstappen, and again, I just don't understand the relationship between Ocon and Verstappen. They just hate each other seemingly, and it seemed like the weekend was going to be very tricky for the Frenchman because of that, but he recovered a huge amount come the opening lap, dodging that chaos at turn 1, and then put in a couple of mega stints, like holding onto his tyres perfectly, and was more than deserving of a 4th place finish. And last was a similar story. After starting in 19th place, he jumped up, taking advantage of those spinning in front of him, probably quietly smug that it was Fernando Alonso causing the problems, but he still had to find some race pace, and he did that really well. He got the car home in 5th place. It was his best performance since the start of the season, in my opinion, and it's performances like this that prove to the doubters he really does have what it takes to cut it in Formula 1. It's really nice to see that he's bounced back after that miserable slump in the middle of the season, but we need to see performances like this from Lance Stroll way more often. Throwing in another one of my own opinions, can Alpine just have a normal race weekend, like ever? They're just so frustrating as a team. There's always drama off track, and then on track, they always manage to do the opposite of what's expected. Like this weekend should have been terrible because the Alpine is pretty poor in a straight line, and yet they were great. Like one car was comfortably through into Q3 with Pierre. Okay, Esteban Ocon dropped out in Q1, but did have the pace probably to get through to Q3 as well. Then come race day, they mess up the strategy with Gasly. Pierre has been doing so well. He has been so quick in recent races, and he was challenging George Russell in the first stint and keeping pace with him comfortably. For him to end up then out of the points, whilst Esteban Ocon absolutely nailed the strategy, as I touched on before, so we end up with their roles completely reversed by the end of the race. But if they'd have just got it right, they could have had 2 drivers in the top 5. On that note about the top 5, Chaos says Lando would have been in the top 5 if he didn't crash. I think just generally McLaren will want to forget that the Vegas weekend ever happened. It felt like another weekend where a battle for the podium places was guaranteed, only for qualifying to be horrendous. Again, neither car got out of Q1. Lando Norris retired on the 2nd lap, which meant we didn't get to see another incredible recovery drive from the back, although I'd much rather not see an incredible recovery drive from the back and just have Lando Norris qualify where he actually should. But Oscar Piastri did his best to go for a Lando Norris impression run. The rookie put in a great shift, made some really nice overtakes, especially considering he was on older tyres than most, pitting a little bit earlier. However, that was eventually his downfall. It forced him to pit at the end of the race because he'd only used hard tyres. There was only 7 laps left to go. He was demoted down to 10th place, got 2 points for the team. Again, it just feels horrible to me, a McLaren fan, because it isn't the points haul that they really could have had this weekend. Dane then says, if I had to give Williams and Haas a rating, I would give them a 0. Yeah, nobody from the bottom 4 teams decided to show up this weekend, but I do think Haas and Williams probably come away most disappointed. Haas in particular, considering they still sit bottom of the constructor standings. Kevin Magnussen showed once again that Haas is great in qualifying, but has almost no race pace when it comes to those longer tyre stints. And then Williams starting 5th and 6th, a chance to really end the fight for that 7th place battle in the constructor standings falls away. Albon tried his best, but once Russell overtook him, it looked like everyone just flew by comfortably. So 0 points, and the battle with AlphaTauri goes all the way to Abu Dhabi. And finally, Boo says, overall this weekend, Logan Sargent really did well despite not getting into the points, a well-deserved honourable mention for driver of the day. That Saturday performance was definitely more like it from the American. I remember when Sargent came in, I hyped up his qualifying pace at the start of the season, but we've rarely seen it from him. And I know Alex Albon is still 21-0 in the head-to-heads, but it was nice to see him at least closer to his teammate and really show what he can do given a car he's comfortable in. But then come race day, initially he did match Albon's pace, but he really struggled with his tyres, and once the graining increased, Logan just dropped out of the points in that first stint fairly swiftly. I suppose at least Alex Albon dropped out of the points too, so the disparity between the performances didn't look too big. He's got one race left. Has he done enough to keep his seat? Only James Vowles knows. If you have any hot takes that you think I missed from the 2023 Las Vegas Grand Prix, I would absolutely love to hear them, so make sure you get involved in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, I also made this video here, which I think you'll really enjoy. So click that link and I'll see you over there.